Pete Buttigieg tries to explain the why of GOP's new anti-LGBTQ+ culture wars. Here at Queer News Tonight, we have discussed the historic parallels between the GOP as it exists today and the party of the late 70s and the 80s. It has become a popular political tool when a party isn't doing well with its voter base to create arguments targeting specific groups of people to unite voters against a scapegoat. Recently, while speaking at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg called out the current rhetoric from the Republican Party. Watch this.
There's a more superficial political pattern that I think has driven some of the politics of the behavior of people like these people in Florida that don't say gay bill. And that is, when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a culture war. So you got a political faction that really doesn't have a lot of answers for many of the questions that people are wrestling with. They love talking about gas prices, but they don't have an answer on gas prices. They don't have an answer on inflation. Many of them answered our call for bipartisan infrastructure work with a no. Haven't seen an answer on what to do about the price of prescription drugs. They voted against lowering that. Don't have an answer on what to do about the cost of childcare. Don't have a great answer on taxes. Actually want to raise taxes for the poor. That's a new one. I thought I'd seen it all. Then I saw Senator Scott's proposal to raise taxes for the poor. That's not great territory for them to be debating on. So what do? They find somebody vulnerable and pick on them, which at the moment is largely the trans community. And they find something to talk about which can go between the laughable, like is Donald Duck going to make your kid gay, to the incredibly dark, which is the suggestion that the very presence of someone who is gender nonconforming or trans or gay or lesbian or otherwise different, that the very existence of somebody like that is an adult subject, right? That if my kids in, let's say, a first grade classroom were to mention in passing that over the weekend they had a great time going with their dads to the zoo, that they would have somehow, by saying that, uttered something age inappropriate and get us really fired up about that fight.
Wow. Well, first of all, I am just such a fan of Pete Buttigieg. I have been from day one, and I still am.
You said his name right from day one, where the rest of us were still saying it wrong.
Yeah.
But he is
Mayor Pete.
You know, I've always found him so eloquent and in such an accessible way.
Yeah.
And now that he's 40, he's speaking, and a father, he's speaking so much from the heart, and yet still the content is still so solid and on point. I'm just such a fan of his, just for starters.
Definitely, yeah.
And that was just 2 minutes of it, right?
I watched the whole hour-plus
thing.
thing, and I highly recommend it because it's riveting, because he's extemporaneous, he can just go on and just speak, and it's just...
He has a way to say so relevant things, in a way to sticking it up to the, the powerful, and it's so timely what he's saying. And the other day I was watching John DeFiti, you know who he is, the local reporter, confronting Ron DeSantis in a press conference, and basically addressing that. There are so many issues in the state of Florida. For example, what happened after the Surfside collapse, and the issues with insurance in condos around Florida.
Insurance and
3 million people affected in the state of Florida, and they haven't done nothing. It's going to be a year since the collapse. Instead, he dedicates all his energy and effort to go after the don't say gay.
And again, why? So they can win
That's exactly
an
right.
election.
Yeah, that's it.
And once we identify that, our response in LGBT and allies is, are we going to stand up against that, or are we just going to fold? And that's the question. That over the next 6 months, that is the question. We identified the problem, we asked the question, now we're going to find out the answer.
But Al, I'm sorry, Al, what does one do? This is just an out there question. How do you even play the game, I'm going to call it the game, when there's no even playing field because they're not even in the arena. It's like we're like playing basketball and they show up with a hockey puck. And you're like,
there's no question, this
Sorry,
culture
Tom.
war play, they're playing poker and they've got the cards in their hand. And the first thing that the LGBTQ community must do, at least in our discussion, and like our discussions here at the table, is to recognize that we're getting our asses handed to us.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that we must do. Please don't, we're going to go next month and rah-rah pride to nausea, ad nauseum. Nothing wrong with that. But if that's all we do, if we run in the parade and have great Saturday night parties and
We're screwed.
we're
Screwed. We're
it's
so
not enough.
Yeah.
we are going to get our asses handed to us. And it's going to have substantive effect like marriage rights.
We already are getting our asses handed to us. If I can just, right before we went on the air tonight, or late this afternoon anyway, the Senate failed to break filibuster on abortion bill. 49 to 51. Not one Republican, but one Democrat did vote against abortion. Joe Manchin.
Right.
Mayor Pete talked, or Secretary Pete talked about the hammer that the GOP has. We're losing in legislatures. We already talked about 335 bills introduced. The Michigan coup, if anybody remembers that from a couple years ago, those people were acquitted by a jury. So we don't even just have to worry about the
City
Supreme
Hall,
Court.
the City Hall thing when they took it over. Is that what that was?
No, when they plotted to kill the governor of
Oh, that was
Michigan.
right.
Yeah, they were acquitted by a federal jury in West Michigan. And that Wisconsin shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse, he was acquitted. He just walked down the street and shot people with an automatic rifle or some type of rifle.
AR-15.
2 people just walked down the street and then walked home, and he was acquitted.
The white guy.
The white guy.
kid.
The white
Yeah,
guy.
well,
And
because he's
they
white. That's
applauded
why.
that. He became a
Yes.
hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where we're losing. We're not just losing at the Supreme Court. We're losing, like, with our neighbors are going to empower these people to have violence against us in our homes, in our streets. That's the scary part.
Two countries are evolving
Yeah.
out of what we're watching, and we have to choose a side. We have to choose a side. If you get dragged along by the train, all that's happening is you get dragged along by the train. Before we move on, one last observation that I want to make about Pete, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I hope, and I say this sincerely, you watch that magnificent 2 minutes, the magnificent hour that you talked about. I hope I live long enough to see what I know is going to happen.
Touche, yes.
He is going to be the President of the United States.
I got chills.
I just hope I'm alive to see it. But I have absolutely zero doubt that he's going to be the President of the United States.
I'll be alive for it. Don't worry.
You're an age joke, right in the middle of the punch. Pete Buttigieg, rarely do we listen to politicians perform so spectacularly as that presentation. You explained culture war and what's happening and why it's happening as good as any single person on this planet. Congratulations to you, and you are going to be the President of the United States. And I hope, if I get to see it, I hope Tucker Carlson gets to see it.
Oh, Lord, you haven't mentioned him today.
He's my best friend.
Although I wouldn't mind if he left the face of the planet like now.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire